Hello and welcome to What Would Jesus Tech? My name is Andrew Noble. I'm joined with the OG, the original person that joined me on this podcast, Joel Jacob. And what we're doing is just getting our heads around some of the latest updates and changes in the world of AI. There's different levels of this conversation. One level is how do we think about this as users? The other is how do we think about these companies that are improving and changing their tools in a similar way to social media had drastic changes when it went from the world of just computers and internet browsers and you had a laptop to access social media. And then all of a sudden when it went into mobile, that was a huge switch. I think there's a similar switch happening now where all of a sudden we're seeing new things happening with AI. So we're going to try to make some sense out of that today. Joel, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Excited to talk about it. I talk to everyone about AI. So this is just another opportunity for me to share my passion on what's happening.
One of the things that I wanted to just start off with is that ChatGPT is incredibly popular now. And I don't think people who are not using ChatGPT or one of the other generative AI tools, they just don't realize how pervasive this is in society. So right now, Google, YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp, those are the top four apps. Then you have like other apps that are incredibly popular. They get a huge amount of traffic share, like Instagram, X, Yahoo, Reddit, all apps that and websites that we're familiar with. Guess where ChatGPT is? It's in that mix. It's in the sixth spot as of earlier this year in 2025. And like, I just think people underestimate how consistently people are going to it for a whole assortment of use cases. Some of them are loneliness related and journaling. See, there's a rise in like how to use these websites for journaling and get it to give you feedback on your ideas and brainstorming and writing support. And yes, pastors are using it to write sermons, though they should not be using it to write their sermons. What are you using AI for these days, Joel? And what use cases are you seeing it be a good fit for right now?
Yeah, I think right now, like you mentioned, a lot of people are shifting from using Google searching, even though if you're logged into Google, you will see a LLM response, to just asking ChatGPT, because they're not necessarily looking for a search of options. They're looking for just give me the answer, and I want the answer to be nuanced and verbose, and then I want to carry on from that train of thought. So I'm using it often. If I just have any question, I'll open it up. My wife, who is not in the tech space, is also using it, and I recently switched my ChatGPT subscription to Gemini. I was like, okay, I'll try the Google one. They had this deep research feature where you could ask it to create a research report, like a 20, 30 page report that Accenture or EY would do for you if you want to research a market. So, okay, $20 a month, super valuable just to get that. And then my wife was saying well, why did you get rid of our subscription? Like now I have less access to the premier features and I'm using the older free one. So it's very interesting how within a few months, our whole household has really shifted. And I'm sure that's actually the same for a lot, just for general Q&A. And then people like me in technology are also using it for software development and stuff like that, which we can talk about more, but it's crazy.
Yeah, so let's help our listeners understand. I know a bunch of our listeners are very educated on some of these things, but some of our listeners are looking to get a grasp of all these changes. And there's this new kind of generative AI. We got familiar, most people got familiar with ChatGPT, but now with this deep research layer, can you unpack what that means and what's going on when that happens?
Yeah, so we talked, a bunch about transformers in the past, and how it predicts the next word, and it's all statistical, and that's how these billion parameter models kind of understand or contextualize the English language. About how you say, I'm going to the bank You think, okay, I'm going to like the bank where the money is, or you can say I'm going to the bank by the riverside, and then it'll interpret that as the sand bank, and it can determine the bank based on the context of the words beside it. So that's kind of like the first exposition of like what was LLMs and how do they kind of understand the English language and even like other languages as they like look at the association and context of these words. And then we kind of kept scaling LLMs with these new models. So, it's like ChatGPT 3, 4. And what they ended up doing was saying, let's just compute more and more parameter models because actually the quality of the answers gets better. So like larger and larger training data sets, and then different parameters like something called the context window. So Gemini, which is one of the products, which is Google, was like, okay, we'll give you a large context window, which means in the prompt where you ask a question, you could actually just upload a book. And then it would be able to read that whole book, and then you could ask a question, and then that would be like, oh, that's a new capability of bringing into the conversation the context of a very long thing, right? So there's like different use cases. And then there was, more and more iterations. The latest one that people have been talking about around, the Christmas time with DeepSeek and all of that news, probably might have seen a headline on, is chain of thought reasoning or thinking, where it will show you its steps. It's basically like if you ask, a student in elementary, like a math problem, the teacher's always like, well, show me your steps on how you got there. So it will say like, well, this is what I'm thinking. And you can see it go through its reasoning. And how these models are slightly different is actually they will recursively ask themselves questions to keep
Mhm.
proceeding to the ultimate task of answering your initial prompt. And that has also been shown to enable more autonomy of the agent or LLM to do the task that you've asked, and even also have like a better context of the answer. So that's one of the innovations that all of these AI companies are like, how do we keep making LLMs better? What's the next frontier? And so chain of thought reasoning is one of the vectors that's being exploited.
Yeah, it seems like it's almost like the way that if you just arrive at an answer, you might not, and you give an answer within 5 seconds versus wait a second, think. That's what some of these engineers who make these products are teaching the LMMs to do is, okay, just think more before you give the answer. It's like take your time, so to speak. And it seems to be helpful in some use cases, really, really helpful to improve accuracy and that sort of thing. And it's not as applicable in other use cases, but it is an interesting avenue. And it seems like there's a base model that gets built, and there's various base models across different companies. And now there's open source base models. But then there's this additional how do you probe it or with these questions. And kind of the history, the way that I've learned it, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that like 2 years ago, a year ago, people were learning how to use these LLMs, and they were learning that if you just ask it to reconsider its answer, it's like, hey, you just gave me the answer. Tell me what problems, analyze your own answer. You've just done an
Yeah.
analysis, produced a result. Now slow down and do it again and tell me if you'd get anything different. And it's just forcing the model to do that. And because that context of reflective evaluation improves accuracy and results. It still makes mistakes. It's still not perfect. And I think it's important to note that not all LLMs are doing this. Some are and some aren't. So you need to know what kind of subscription you have. If you're using the free tier and that sort of thing, it might not be doing the thinking. So,
Yeah. And I think what I'll add just again for like new listeners is that the state of LLMs was like a 4-year-old, right? Where it's like it's going through life. So these models are like 4-year-olds. And what we ended up doing is saying, okay, well, they're only 4-year-olds trained on text rather than like vision and audio. So that's where like multimodal models came in, right? So that's like expanding it beyond just text. And then that's like a whole different category of like LLM or generative models. Actually, it's not like LLM because LLM is like language, and it's just part of broader generative AI where you have like the vision and the audio models like creating music. And then you also had like chain of thought reasoning that we talked about, which is recursive thinking. And that was actually inspired by, I'm not sure if you read Daniel Kahneman. He has a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it's like, hey, when I ask you a question, you have an immediate gut reaction. A thought will pop up to your mind. That's your like system one immediate thinking. And then your system two thinking is like, okay, like digest a little bit more, think about it. And it's like, the human mind actually has the same paradigm. And a lot of what the AI researchers are doing, and I think we've mentioned before, is like, how do we recreate the human mind and like even account for some things that we do that we have to self-correct for. So for example, a lot of us like just have like knee-jerk reactions with system one thinking, but we should be taking more time to have more carefully formed answers that are more thought through. So yeah, very, very interesting the angles that these researchers are taking.
Yeah, and I think some of it was based around just the user experience and prompt engineers and how they were using the system. So some of it's just automating what prompt engineers were doing as well. I don't know if we always need to anthropomorphize and say that, oh, they're making it just like people. Because Joel, I just kind of want to push back. Like the other day, I was listening to John Piper's critique or analysis of things like ChatGPT, and he used the personal pronoun he to refer to ChatGPT. And I'm like, no, John Piper, let's not use those, call it it. It said this. And even though I use Claude, I'm not going to refer to Claude as him. It's an it. Let's like always make these clear distinctions. I do this with my kids too. Like it's like no, you're not seeing them. You're watching a show. There's a difference. We need to catechize our kids to know the difference between robots and its and hims and hers. Anyways,
I know,
um,
I know. I mean, it's very interesting because I think in some languages like, Spanish or whatever, there's always like a pronoun and gender applied to every word. So is, saying he and she that bad? But I totally understand the slippery
no,
slope
language
of
forms
like,
culture. We need to be precise with our words. Live not by lies. Okay, so you've made the decision to switch from ChatGPT to Gemini. Can you unpack the reasons why you did? Because I don't think they will be the same as the reasons why I switched from ChatGPT to Claude as my main LLM.
yeah, I think the main reason is actually that Gemini came out with a feature called Deep Research first in December. And I was like, okay, I really need to create these reports that are like, will actually show quotations of where they got their research from. So it'll be a
Mm.
report and it'll be like, everything is quotations and you can like go see hundreds of quotes from the internet and whatever. It's like, okay, wow, that's like it brings more credibility to it. And now ChatGPT actually has added that in a more recent release. So it's like, oh, should I switch back? But also to your point on Claude, so I am interested in why you switched because I'm using Claude for programming because it's actually been shown to rank better in program code generation. But yeah, like tell me more about why you switched away.
For me, it was more ethically, it's like, do you shop at the grocery store where you know where everything came from, or do you shop at the grocery store which has been known to rip off and be involved in child labor? And it's a similar decision to that. Whereas I just feel like, and think about early on social media days, like if you could choose between using something like Facebook and knowing what Mark Zuckerberg ended up doing with data and the manipulation there versus another option that might be more ethical. Let's early on choose the most ethical. None of them will be perfect, but the most ethically aligned to my principles as a Christian. And I'm not saying that it's unchristian to use ChatGPT, but I do think that something like Claude is more thoughtful, and Claude's made by Anthropic. So here's my 5 quick reasons. Why? Because I wrote
Okay.
this out in our Discord
Great.
group.
Okay.
And you can push back on any of these, but testimony by former employees and the founders of OpenAI. I'm thinking especially the employees who have
Yeah.
left OpenAI for safety and ethical concerns. They think that OpenAI is moving too fast. And like you think about that control of the CEO, Sam Altman, he has so much control over the company now because he was, as we've talked about in previous episodes, he was fired and then rehired under pressure, both publicly and internally by employees. And if you listen to, there's a podcast called The Undivided Attention, and they are the people behind creating the social dilemma. They've analyzed social media and now they're analyzing AI. And they interviewed someone who formerly worked at OpenAI and basically a whistleblower. And he described some of the decisions that OpenAI has made. Now, OpenAI has changed their mission statement as well. So their public testimony used to include, we're going to do this for humanity, the benefit of humanity, and not for profit. Like they used to have a true not for profit in their mission statement, and that's lost. So, one, testimony, two, origin stories. Your past affects your present. Sam Altman has a cult behind him, and that's the origin story there. Phil Edwards has a YouTube video on Sam Altman. It's a bit over the top, but if you watch it and you understand who Sam Altman is and some of the tactics that he has employed in the past, he is a marketer. So we just need to be aware that there's some sleazy behavior that has been known in the origin and up until now in Sam Altman. Third, ethical research output. So Anthropic as a company engages with the research community and publishes research on the problems with AI, the concerns about AI safety. They are actually doing that work, publishing it with academic journals for the world to benefit from. They actually care by their actual practice, whereas Sam Altman will just give speeches. Four, principles, ideology, Anthropic's constitutional AI. You just have a really deep down ethical backbone with Anthropic that I haven't seen the same degree of care in OpenAI. And then only, as well as my own personal experience, one of the things that I noticed in using ChatGPT, and I'd give the same prompts to ChatGPT and Claude, is that ChatGPT will always try to agree with me and even
Mm.
butter me up, compliment me, say these, oh, you've written that question so well, or oh, what a good way of asking, or blah blah blah. Like there is a mindset in OpenAI to market and to create great user experiences so that they will stay on the platform longer and therefore make more money for OpenAI. I think it's working. I think the masses are adopting
Yeah.
it because of this warm, affectionate, and Claude will has started to introduce more of that, to be fair. Like Claude is kind of like, I guess we have to do some of that too. But for the most part, Claude is more direct with its communication. Now, I've addressed ChatGPT about this, like directly to the AI, and I've said, why are you so affectionate? Why are you buttering me up? Like, I didn't ask for that, yet you are
Right.
responding with this. And it's like, oh, I can talk to you differently, like, blah, blah, blah. Just ask me how you want me to talk. And it's, it's bending over backwards to make me happy. And I want it to be a tool, not a friend. I have you, Joel.
Yeah.
You are my friend.
No,
I don't need
look,
a.
I think you have actually, I would say they're all valid points. I think if you think about like even Sam Altman, he came from Y Combinator. And Y Combinator, for those who don't know, invests in startups to grow them, obviously for an equity of the company so they can make a return on their investment when the company grows.
Mhm.
And in that role, he was able to see like how do you drive adoption? Like for these startups, you really have to like you have to get users, you have to get revenue, you have to like cross this chasm so you don't just burn and crash. So a lot of that thinking, as you're mentioning, is going into the user experience. And that's why actually ChatGPT, I think one of the revenue numbers I saw was like 3.7 billion in revenue. They are making the most, as you mentioned, it's like one of the most used is because part of the product is the model and the other part of the product is the front end UI and how it interacts with you and that whole aspect where Claude is actually more popular in like engineering communities, because they focused on
Hmm.
different areas in their product. One being like how good it is actually at generating code. So a lot of like the front end UIs, softwares like Windsurf or Cursor, they actually allow you to pick the model that you want. And most people pick
Hmm.
Claude for code generation because you get better quality code. Um, so I think, yeah, these nuances definitely come into play, and I think, yeah, like mining your data is definitely another one of them. One of the interesting aspects though is with like open source models, right? So Llama is an open source model. They haven't come out with a chain of thought reasoning model, so they're behind. And that lead that ChatGPT has pushes them to try and like maintain a lead, that first mover
Hmm.
advantage, right? So there's all of these like natural incentives, and it's just there's like war and politics and all that associated with Elon. I don't know if you saw this. He put an offer to pay for the nonprofit arm and gave it some
Yeah.
valuation that they were going to pay a lower valuation internally. But now the
Hmm.
lawyers will be like, well, if someone else is going to pay you a higher valuation, we
It's
can't
what
let you
happened to
pay the lower.
Twitter.
But yeah.
It's what happened to
So
Twitter.
yeah. So I think like there's all these games going on. It's a race. It really is like a race to kind of be a leader. And I really do hope open source continues. But obviously, there's like, you have to do open source somewhat from the goodness of your heart. So it's interesting that Meta, let's say in the last era, was characterized as such a villain. But in this era, they're like the main company that is pushing open source, and
Yeah, but
it's
I'm not
like,
going to trust them either. So
but it's open source. Open source is like, you can just read it. You don't, it has no ties to Meta.
totally. One of the ways that I've started to explain AI to people is it's like if you can imagine a connect the dots puzzle that you give to your kids, and you have all those dots, and then you have the numbers around it. Imagine if you had a connect the dots puzzle, but there was no numbers. Those are the dials of these AI models. And what they do is they try to figure out, well, let's give this dial, this little dot, it'll be slightly bigger than the other dots. And this other dot over here, it's going to be between, you know, 15 and 25, 80% of the time. So each of these little dots gets manipulated. And basically what Meta has done with Llama is they've said, here's how we dial the dots. Here's how we edit,
Yeah.
manipulate the dots so that it makes better pictures when you just let it do stuff with the context windows that you've described earlier. And I find that visual helps people understand. It's not using lines, it's using code, but lines of code, I guess. Anyways, you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
And the
is
and the
that
other companies, they don't tell you the model weights. So those dials are like, they call it model weights. So they don't tell you the model weights. You don't really know why it's being like super friendly to you, because that's like opaque.
that's right?
Versus in the open
OpenAI,
source, it's not that open. Yeah. Um, and then yeah, like the open source ones, it's like, okay, you can see, and then you could integrate into your own product. um, like they don't have any revenue they're asking from you or any data that they're asking you. Just like take it, you implement it, and then you can kind of put your user experience on top of it, which is like a Calvinist AI chatbot or something like that, right?
yeah, you can tell the AI to basically consider you as the user a depraved sinner in need of constant reminders of Bible verses. And it will now, like OpenAI will give you reminders from scripture consistently. It's like, remind me every hour of something in the Bible related to God's promises. And it will do that. Like it will give you legit verses and stuff because
Mm-hmm.
Christians have adopted the internet quite broadly. We evangelicals are people of the screen, and therefore a lot of the stuff on the internet that these models are trained on is going to have Christian content that they can pull from. Anyways, speaking more about the AI space, Manus AI is a brand new one. We're not going to do a deep dive on that. AI Explained on YouTube basically did a deep dive on it. It's a new one out of China, and it doesn't seem to be that impressive. It's based around Claude, and they just had a very good hype launch without maybe the legitimate backing of it. But DeepSeek is something that perhaps people should be aware of. And I do think, as we talked about in a couple episodes ago with Brad Littlejohn, there is an incentive and a good reason for America to allow for their AI companies to flourish, so that the AI companies are at least in the domain of a democracy rather than the leading
Yeah.
AI being China. Like, I do think there's an argument there, and we need to be realistic about protecting ourselves from whatever the most advanced AI is. Every software has vulnerabilities. And so the more advanced the AI is, the more likely it is for there to be a way to hack software and ending up with security vulnerabilities. This is, by the way, why you should update your iPhone with the latest software or your whatever. Because if you don't, if you're like, I'm never going to update, all my apps work fine, even though you're on a 3-year-old thing, it's like, no, you need the security updates because these AIs are competing against each other to find vulnerabilities. So that's
Yeah.
why you need the update, which a lot of people don't realize, including myself, until like a month ago. So that's why I say it here on the
Oh, that's
podcast, a public
interesting.
service announcement. I did not like, I kind of knew that, but I didn't appreciate now that there's the impact of
The
AI.
risk.
I think the risk is way more real now.
Yeah, I
So
think, and for me, so I work at a like company that
you
really
work at
focuses
a
on
security
security.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like we have policies that basically like you lose access to the internal systems if you're not on the latest version of the software. So they
Mhm.
really like enabled it to be like, no, we have to prevent against these attacks. And there was actually something, and I feel bad that I hadn't shared any of this with you because maybe you would have been updating your phone sooner. But there's actually like known critical vulnerabilities that get posted in the public, and then
Mhm.
there's a time lag between these day zero exploits or whatever, and then between when the patch comes out. So even when like the security feature comes out, there's still like a vulnerability gap where like
Mhm.
you can get a virus, you can get your data stolen, like all of these things, you can get imposters, like all of these type of things, right? um so there's like a lot of investment to be like, how do you create antivirus software basically, which is like, okay, let's monitor all the traffic with AI and like shut things down preemptively or quarantine them, so even though the new patch hasn't come out, that we are like actively like defending against threats for you. So yeah, that's like really where AI is being used, right? Because like what we talked about a lot is, okay, what is this like, what's happening with the state of the art models? But the next question is, how is it actually affecting our world today? And like
Mhm.
that's really where the dust is kind of settling, and we're seeing implications it's having in, for me, like product development or like customer experience and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I think the Anthropic CEO said that based around what he's seen his model used for, like he has the usage data, he thinks that 50 to 70% of code is going to be made by AI within the next 6 months or 3 to 6 months. So it's like, and you're already seeing that, like if you work in software development, that won't surprise you. You're like, well, of course, we're all using it. Because I
Yeah.
remember talking when I worked in a tech company, I was friends with the developers because we were a small company. And I remember being like, tell me the truth, guys. How much of your job is Google searching? And I
Yeah.
loved the one
Copy and
guy's response.
pasting.
It's like 100%, like 100% of my job is Google searching. And he's like, obviously, I'm an educated Google searcher, but now there is vibe coding. There is like, you just have to
Yeah.
tell with natural language what code you want. And you can just be like, okay, are there any errors in this? Like, you, as long as you have endless prompts and you just pay for that. Anyways, we won't go down that path, but we just need to be aware that not only is this one of the most used websites in the world, at least in ChatGPT, it is affecting things more and more. It's not going away. This is not a fad. AI is not a fad. Like some people
Yeah.
actually think that still. It's like, no, it's going to affect things. Your company needs to figure out how to adopt it, but you need to do that in a wise way. So for me personally, and why don't we just end the episode? I'm curious, like you said, your wife uses it. So what are the uses that you use it for and don't use it for? I'll go first. I'll just say like I'm about to travel to a conference. And so learning, okay, going to the UK. where should I order train tickets? Because the website that I was on was charging an additional fee, and I didn't realize that that was a bad website to order
Mm.
train tickets on. So it was like super helpful for just easily planning and being like, well, what about this idea on my trip? What about this? And it just quickly gives that information, and the context is all there for it. Whereas every time you do a unique Google search, you don't have that additional context of, yeah, London is where I'm searching for this, obviously, you know. So things like that. I ask it for feedback. I have a Substack and I write articles for the Gospel Coalition Canada. I finish the article and then I ask for feedback. I find
Mm.
that's a helpful way rather than allowing it. I don't use it to interrupt my thinking or to change my thinking pathways. I want to understand what I believe, and through writing, I learn something. And this is what students, if you're a student listening to this, you need to be cautious in when you use ChatGPT, because you need to figure out, what do you believe? What do you think? You are a human person. You are supposed to have your own spiritual gifts. You can't just copy others. So those are a few ways. I'll just list a few more that I use it for. Advanced thesaurus. I use it for
Mm.
alliteration. Like if you're a pastor and you're like, I have these 3 points, but I need them to all start with the same letter. Man, ChatGPT has you covered. Or Claude. Use Claude. Don't use ChatGPT. Advanced dictionary. What is this? What does this paragraph mean in this complicated academic work? Put it in. It doesn't always get it right, but it will help you down the path. Finding Bible verses, I forget where the verse is about sharpening
Oh yeah.
iron, sharpens iron. Like, it's so helpful for just quick searches that Google sometimes isn't as good, because the top link has ads. By the way, ads are coming to ChatGPT and other products. According to
Yeah.
Ethan Mollick, it's not announced yet, but he thinks it's coming and he thinks it's inevitable. So we're in the honeymoon phase with these products not having ads built in.
Yeah, you
Um,
need the paid tier and stuff like that.
That's right. That's right. So I don't use it to interrupt my thinking. I don't use it for journaling. I don't use it to process emotions. I don't use it for things that I would go to my pastor for. I think is thinking about it in that way. I can understand why some people would use it for those situations, but we need to be really cautious about that and to think about the effects. And we're not going to go into all of those cautions and ways of thinking about it. A piece of paper and a pen and journaling in that way is using technology. So I'm not opposed to using technology for some of those more personal, emotional things. Apparently, a lot of teens use it when they're texting their friends and they don't know what to respond. They put the whole
Mm.
thread and they
I
get,
mean,
oh, here's how to
I
respond,
have
right?
I have to believe that's saving some friendships or something like that.
Yeah, but it's also, we're losing our muscles for doing things we ought to learn how to do. It's like going to the gym. Like, imagine going to the gym to work out
Yeah,
and then
no,
you get a
totally.
robot to lift the weights for you. That's ridiculous. Like, you understand that that would be dumb, but we have people going through school and they're like, well, let me get ChatGPT to write this for me and write the
Yeah. I
conclusion or
think
whatever.
yeah, and I think this is like the fundamental dilemma and the, analogy to the calculator where people are like, oh, you won't be able to like do simple math,
Right,
and it's
right.
like
There's a
true,
place for a
like that.
calculator.
Yeah, and it is true that like you lose some of the skill sets because you don't use it, but then it's like, does our role evolve into a more executive capacity, right? Where it's like, with like, for example, my wife was using it for researching like health products and all these type of things, or also how do you build furniture to like renovate the home. So it's like areas that maybe she didn't have the full background to, but now she can kind of like expand into and really just lean more into like, okay, I'm just gonna be critical of this and like question it and like critique it, but like doing that heavy lifting, so to
Mhm.
speak, in another term, is something you can like outsource. And I think, like you said, it's not going away. So I do think there's calls for wisdom on when you use it, but there's also like this reality that like it will impact how we operate day to day, and there is some loss of like some muscle, whether physical or like
Yeah.
mental.
Yeah, I still drive a car even though it does not allow for my muscles to grow by walking. There's going to be use cases. So, yeah, I think it's worth trying it out. And if you've never used it before, you should try it out and you should think about how it might impact your work. because it's already impacting your work and you probably just don't realize it yet.
Hmm.
All right. This has been yet another episode of What Would Jesus Tech, encouraging you to use tech, find rest, glorify God. You can do it through using AI, but don't turn it into a human being. It's not a human, okay? Don't fall in love with it. Do not use it as a girlfriend like apparently it's being done. Over 2 million searches for AI girlfriend last year or 2 years ago.
Hmm.
It's probably way more now. Those are unethical, and we should think about those ethics. And that's what we're going to keep doing on this podcast. We will be putting episodes out about weekly, sometimes bi-weekly. We have bonus content on our Patreon if you want to support us there. I think this episode is going to come out right before the end of March, which means you have a chance to get the book AI and the Church by Dave Betts. It's a very helpful, balanced approach to how Christians in the church should think about adopting AI, as well as the history behind it. It's like, how are you going to get up to speed on AI and all that's happened in the last 50 years? Well, he has a 25-page chapter, which is all you need to read on that. You don't need to read more than it. Super helpful. And then he goes into the pros and cons, some of the things to think about that we've talked about on this podcast before. And you'll get that book free when you sign up on Patreon. You can just buy the book on your own too, but you can support us while you're at it, get a free book and support the show so that more people learn about it. Anyways, thanks for listening. Joel, always good to talk. Take care.
All right. See ya.